This is a quick discussion and demonstration of the Stihl MS-192C. This is, they're basically Stihl's professional limbing saw, and I have spent most of my life using the Farm Boss series that they have, which is an 029. I have grown now that I almost always grab this saw for most cutting that I do instead of the 029, mainly because the weight. The actual unit itself is about 7 or 8 pounds. With the blade and the chain, it probably hits 10 pounds at the most. My wife likes to call it the Polly Pocket chainsaw. I think actually that's an apt description. It uses a slightly different chain than some of the bigger saws. In this case, it uses, I have a 14-inch blade on it, and it uses a 3/8 inch blade, or pardon me, 3/8 inch teeth, versus I believe it's 5/8 on the larger chains. And I guess the main reason they do that is because a thinner chain means that they have to move less material, so the engine doesn't need as much horsepower. It has almost minimal torque. What it has is enough to keep the blade up at cutting speed while the machine is running. And what that means is that you can't bind the blade at all. It'll stop and you'll burn out a tiny little clutch I'll show you at the end of this demonstration. But what it does mean, as long as you don't force the machine and you rely on the sharpness of your blades, this will cut, I find, darn near as effectively as the 029. I mean, it may not have as big of a blade and it may not be as fast, but it's so light and it's so easy to use when you're using it that it suddenly becomes, you can see why they use it as a professional limbing saw. A guy can get out on a tree and do this with it successfully. You can't do that with the 029. And it doesn't have so much torque that with the 029, it's a really legitimate concern that you're going to get kickback. This machine, it's sufficiently underpowered that it won't necessarily kick back on you. And I obviously have to walk a line with that, because I'm not saying it can't kick back. I'm just saying, given the amount of force that it exerts, it's a lot easier to control if it does. So, a little bit about the machine itself. Obviously, it uses 2-cycle oil, and what Stihl finally did on this last couple years is that they turned around and changed the caps into this easy for filling your gas, and this easy for filling your oil. Obviously, I tap the fill the oil every time I fill the gas in this machine. Then you never run a chance of running dry. I just leave it on its auto oiling function, and that's sufficient. They do make a limbing saw that doesn't have this bar. Personally, I like this extra bar. It's quite handy for grabbing on. There are some benefits to the other system if you're up in a tree, but if you're on the ground, this is ideal. One thing I have found with the MS-192C is that if you don't follow the instructions carefully when you're doing the starting, you think that the machine has something wrong with it, and actually it's just very particular in how you have to get it running. And the key is, with any small engine, obviously you depress your your fuel bulb 5 times or so. This machine's cold, it's about 50 degrees outside, and you'll take the choke right now, which is this way. It's hard to see in this lighting. Choke's open means it's like this. Choke on is at an angle. You put it on choke on, you pull the safety and the trigger, and you push this all the way to the start function, release the trigger, and it will hold. Then you pop it until it turns over, and you don't have to pull it like you're trying to rip something out of it. It just needs a short jerk. That's the pop over. As soon as that happens, turn the choke off. And it starts like a dream. I'll quickly demonstrate what I mean by the fact that it's underpowered, and if you force it, you can burn the clutch up in a hurry. Let's do that. So what you can see is that I can cut quite well, but if I force it at all, it immediately stalls. And so the key on this is to let the chain do the cutting and use sharp blades. If you don't do that, you'll destroy the machine and you'll think there's a problem with it. It's not the machine, it's just that you're not using sharp blades or you're binding the blade a lot. blade I have on this thing I've used to cut about a half a cord of wood, so I'd say it's half as sharp as it should be. I might even consider replacing it. I just didn't do it for the purposes of this demonstration. Let me show you that clutch real fast before we get out of here. Obviously, like any other Stihl, you can loosen this and adjust your chain tension with this screw nut here. And the casing on this is a bit funny when you take it off. You have to pop it and lift it. And here is the small clutch that they have on this machine. When you take and put a new chain on this, you have to loosen it significantly to slip it off your bar and over this, and then you put your new chain back on. Other than that little particularity to this unit, there's really no other major hassles that I've had at all with this machine. I found it reliable, I found it consistently starts every time I need to use it, and I find it so light that it's hard not to choose it, even if it picks the name of the Polly Pocket chainsaw and I get harassed for it. I still think that this is a superior unit for most purposes if you're going to be cutting. It just takes the weight off your back, and as you get older that means something. It's not a cheap unit. I don't know the price off the top of my head. I think it's somewhere around $400 or $500, maybe even $600 now. I don't know. Buy it with a bunch of extra chains, obviously, and you know, watch your mix. Use ethanol free in this machine. I haven't found a single small carburetor yet that will process ethanol, nor have I found a product that that keeps ethanol in solution. And what will happen is it turns to this sort of strange, sort of orangey, gunkish stuff that'll fill your carburetor, all the tiny holes in it, and then you're spending $100 and you think there's something wrong with the machine. It's not, it's ethanol. I recently also heard that ethanol doesn't have the same power that petroleum, a pure petroleum gas does, and that you can lose somewhere between 10 and 15% power. Now that's a word of mouth bit of data. I haven't checked on it, but it's interesting to consider. I go out of my way. I always buy 5 gallons of ethanol and ethanol free gas, then I mix it up and I add my Stihl additive, and I cheat up and add a little more than they usually do, and I've always found this machine to I pick it up 12 months later and start it, no problem. Well, anyway, I hope you like this machine as much as we do. I recommend buying it. This was my birthday present, and I've put it into the rental fleet as well, and other than being very particular about making sure that people don't burn up that clutch and force it, I've had people do hedges with it, I've had people cut down trees with it, and I've had women use it because it's light enough for a 98-pound, 5'2" tree carver to use. She was carving a symbol for one of the local businesses in Seattle, and she said that she liked this saw because it was light enough, and apparently it's the preferred saw for chainsaw carvers. So there you have it. Have a good one. Bye.